Welcome in on this Thursday. I'm Elizabeth Cook. On all of our minds today, the tragic news of that plane and helicopter crash near Washington, D.C. We heard from officials earlier today with an update. Take a listen.
We are now at a point where we are switching from a rescue operation to a recovery operation. At this point, we don't believe there are any survivors from this accident.
Now, this investigation now in full force as officials work to uncover how this happened. You're looking at the search for debris that could help answer those questions and, of course, recover the victims of those aboard both aircrafts. Now, this deadly plane crash near Reagan National Airport marks the first major U.S. commercial aircraft accident in over a decade. So this is what we know so far about the moments leading up to the crash. Both the American Airlines flight and the military Black Hawk helicopter were flying standard flight patterns before the collision. The crash happened above the Potomac River last night at 8:48 Eastern Time as the American flight approached Reagan National Airport for landing. And a warning for you at home. We're about to show you the moment of impact. And just moments ago, we got this video of the moment the plane and the helicopter collided. You can see that happen right at the top right corner of your screen, that ball of flames you see there. 60 passengers and 4 crew members were on board the American Airlines Flight 5342 from Wichita to Washington. The Black Hawk helicopter was in the process of training a crew of 3 people. Those crew members were experienced pilots. CBS News also learned they were wearing night vision goggles during that flight. At least 30 bodies have been recovered so far from the Potomac River by search and rescue teams. And as we mentioned earlier, officials believe there are no survivors from this crash. CBS News has not yet confirmed all the people on that flight, but the families of those passengers have been notified. At least one black box was also recovered from the river. We want to play the moment air traffic control spotted the collision before alerting authorities. Take a listen.
American 472, Washington, 1 star, 3217.
Did you see that?
472. American 3130, go around, turn left end, 250, climb maintain 3000. I don't know if you caught earlier what happened, but there was a collision on the approach in the 33. We're going to be shutting down operations for the indefinite future. If you want to go back to the gate, highly suggest you guys coordinate with the company. Let me know what you want to do.
All right, we'll let the company, talking to them right now. Yeah, we witnessed the whole thing.
Now, officials at the scene say 3 debris fields were identified and are actively being searched right now. The plane broke into multiple pieces following the moment of impact. The helicopter remained mostly intact upon the arrival of the recovery team, despite being upside down in the water, we're told. And just moments ago, President Trump addressed the nation to offer his condolences to the families of those victims. Take a listen.
This was a dark and excruciating night in our nation's capital and in our nation's history, and a tragedy of terrible proportions. As one nation, we grieve for every precious soul that has been taken from us so suddenly, and we are a country of we are in mourning. This is really shaken a lot of people, including people, very sadly, from other nations who were on the flight. For the family members back in Wichita, Kansas, here in Washington, D.C., and throughout the United States and in Russia, we have a Russia contingent of very talented people. Unfortunately, were on that plane. Very, very, very sorry about that. Whose loved ones were aboard the passenger jet. We can only begin to imagine the agony that you're all feeling. Nothing worse. On behalf of the First Lady, myself, and 340 million Americans, our hearts are shattered alongside yours, and our prayers are with you now and in the days to come. We'll be working very, very diligently in the days to come. We're here for you to wipe away the tears and to offer you our devotion, our love, and our support. There's great support. In moments like this, the differences between Americans fade to nothing compared to the bonds of affection and loyalty that unite us all, both as Americans and even as nations. We are one family, and today we are all heartbroken. We're all searching for answers.
Let's get right to CBS News congressional correspondent Caitlin Huey-Burns. She's at Reagan National Airport. Caitlin, thank you for being with us. I want to get to what he said in that press conference in just a moment. But first, can you talk a little bit about what's happening there at the airport? We know it just reopened to the public. Walk us through what you're seeing there on the ground.
Yeah, it's great to be with you. This airport just reopened to the public. You can see people wheeling their suitcases behind me and heading off to their flights. This is significant because this airport shut down soon after that crash just before 9 p.m. last night. We arrived here at 2 in the morning to a completely empty, shut down airport, except for the families of those who they lost in the crash the night before. They gathered in an American Airlines lounge inside this airport to meet with officials and be together. We encountered one woman at around 3 a.m. who arrived here at the airport looking for any news about her friend who she found out was on that flight. So very somber morning here and into these early hours, and that's when we found out too that officials said that there were no survivors here. But everything has moved on, at least technically, here at this airport. I talked to one gentleman who was confident about boarding his flight. He was actually from Wichita originally. He was heading to the area as well today, not concerned about safety, and that has been the line coming from officials as well, that this shouldn't have happened, but that consumers, flyers, Americans around the country should still be confident that the planes they're boarding are safe.
And Caitlin, as we mentioned, this is now turned into a recovery mission. They don't anticipate finding any survivors. What more can you tell us about the next steps, though, in the investigation into why this happened?
Yeah, well, this investigation now moves into the purview of the NTSB, and we don't know yet how long that investigation will take. Yesterday, after this crash, just before 9 p.m., we had 300 first responders at the scene. When I was here in the wee hours of the morning, you could see all of the bright lights from those first responders' vehicles. Then several hours later, fewer and fewer of them. We know that the commercial aircraft, that American Airlines plane, when it hit the water, it broke into 3 pieces, and so that is part of the investigation as well. Divers have been there. The recovery effort is well underway here and has been, and they're waiting to see official counts of what they have so far, but as we mentioned, officials say there were no survivors here. Lots and lots of questions remain about how this could have happened. Officials note that the pattern of this commercial aircraft and the idea that there was a military aircraft is completely normal. That happens all the time. So what was the miscommunication perhaps, or what went wrong? No one has, at least the public, answers to that yet.
Yeah, it was interesting because, Caitlin, in the press conference that President Trump just gave, he suggested that the blame of all this should be placed on the helicopter pilots, and he also cited DEI policies. Is there any evidence that you know of, or that officials know of, that points to that being the reason for this crash?
Well, that was the first time we had heard it, and actually when he was asked in a follow-up, what is the evidence? Do you have any evidence that DEI policies are to blame? The president said he didn't know, but he thinks it could have been. Now, a little bit of context here, at least to explain those comments. Remember, when the president took office just last week, some of the first executive orders that he signed were to revoke DEI programs at various levels. And you heard from other officials at that press conference, his defense secretary, his vice president, his Secretary of Transportation, who just started this job yesterday after being sworn in, all echoed that sentiment as well. So there is no answer to that, and the president himself had acknowledged that he does not have evidence for that at this point.
I want to go back to the victims who were on board this tragic flight, Caitlin. We understand an ice skating club from Boston lost several members of their team in this collision. What more do we know about that? And you also mentioned that there's some Russian nationals that were on this flight.
Yeah, also part of that U.S. skating federation. This was a group that had been competing in Wichita and had been making their way back here to Washington. We are still waiting, of course, for official names, but we do know from U.S. ice skating that they did have team members on that flight, unfortunately. There is a lot left to be known about who else was on that flight. You heard from lawmakers here in Virginia, where this airport actually is, just at the border of D.C., you know, some members from this area and across the country. So as we're waiting to hear more about the victims here, we know that their families were notified last night, many of them here at this airport, also looking for answers. Of course, that is all at the heart of this, those lost souls in this horrific collision that is really a tragedy here in Washington.
Oh my goodness, absolutely, Caitlin. And we also heard from passengers in Washington that were at the airport at the time of the crash. They witnessed it. We want to play some of that sound for you and then talk on the other side.
I'm sure they're going through just horror. Can't imagine how terrible that is. The chances of a plane crash are so rare that you hear about these things a lot these days, and where in the olden days you didn't hear about this stuff because news didn't travel so fast. So you gotta think that our chances are pretty good getting on a plane this morning.
We were in the middle of the air while the pilot said that there is a tragic incident happened in the DC airport. They could not land. We were scared, we were shocked, we are all kids, and everybody's like, what happened?
And our prayers and thoughts are with the families and everybody who's involved in that incident.
You can only imagine the shock and sadness and disbelief that those people who are watching this unfold right in front of their eyes. We understand passengers now face a number of delays and cancellations. So how is this accident and investigation impacting air travel across the country right now?
Well, it's a good question, and this particular airport was adamant about reopening and continuing those flights, and that partly, sends a message to Americans that it is still safe to fly, and we heard that from officials as well. But I can tell you specifically about this airport, this is a highly trafficked airport. This is also a very frequent stop for lawmakers in Washington, coming from here back to their home districts and back to their states. Typically on a Thursday here, you see lots of lawmakers trying to catch last-minute flights back to their home states and districts. And so this is a highly trafficked airport, but it is also very small compared to this city. And what we've heard from lawmakers for a while now is concern about congestion here. Too many flights taking off and too many flights coming in. That is a concern that predated this awful tragedy, but this has been on the top of some lawmakers' minds as they've been conducting oversight of the FAA. And that's another important thing to note here is that Trump did made some news just now saying that he has appointed an acting director, an acting administrator of the FAA. And that's significant because that position has been vacant for several weeks as the previous administrator resigned before this administration took office. This is not a political position, really. It is a 5-year term, and that's meant to extend beyond a president's term so as not to be political. And so having that position now is significant given that it is vacant. But there are going to be so many questions from lawmakers on Capitol Hill, especially with how well acquainted they are with this airport, and again wanting to get that message to Americans across the country about safety when it comes to the air.
Caitlin Huey-Burns from Reagan National Airport. Caitlin, thank you so much for that report. Meanwhile, let's listen to more of what the president had to say about this crash from the White House briefing room earlier this morning. Take a listen.
We do not know what led to this crash, but we have some very strong opinions and ideas, and I think we'll probably state those opinions now. I changed the Obama standards from very mediocre at best to extraordinary. You remember that. only the highest aptitude, they have to be the highest intellect and psychologically superior people were allowed to qualify for air traffic controllers. That was not so prior to getting there. When I arrived in 2016, I made that change very early on because I always felt this was a job that, and other jobs too, but this was a job that had to be superior intelligence.
Now, the president also said that he believes DEI policies played a role in this. Take a listen to that.
I signed something last week that was an executive order, very powerful, on restoring the highest standards of air traffic controllers and others, by the way. Then my administration will set the highest possible bar for aviation safety. We have to have our smartest people. It doesn't matter what they look like, how they speak, who they are. It matters intellect, talent, the word talent. They have to be talented, naturally talented geniuses. You can't have regular people doing that job. They won't be able to do it. But we'll restore faith in American air travel. I'll have more to say about that. I do want to point out that various articles that appeared prior to my entering office, and here's one. The FAA's diversity push includes focus on hiring people with severe intellectual and psychiatric disabilities. That is amazing. And then it says FAA.
All right, let's bring in CBS News senior White House and political correspondent Ed O'Keefe. Ed, thank you for being with us. Has there been any reaction yet to the president's comments during this press conference about DEI policies playing a role in this?
Well, Elizabeth, it wrapped up at the top of the hour, so it's hard to know. But what he's doing there, in essence, and he said he was going to do this, was he's jumping to conclusions before an investigation is even underway. And he said, I'm going to do that because he didn't essentially want to have to wait several years until the investigation is over. And what he's doing is essentially drawing attention to a series of steps he's taken since he became president about 9 days ago that are designed to end, curtail, stop funding all sorts of programs in the realm of diversity, equity, and inclusion that he says have permeated the federal government needlessly over the last several years and taken the eye of those agencies and departments off of their primary mission, which in the case of the FAA is safety, which in the case of all the others is up for debate. He would not say, he was asked, and also kind of avoided questions about whether he was seeing something specific in who was involved in this, either in the air traffic control tower or aboard either of the aircraft, that would suggest that somebody in this was hired under one of those programs or is a minority or something else. But that appeared to be what he was inferring, and then began to back off of it throughout the news conference, suggesting instead that, look, mistakes were made, we'll have an investigation. And we should point out a few things. He said there will be a systematic investigation involving the FAA, the National Transportation Safety Board, which we're expecting to hold its first news briefing in about 90 minutes or so, and the Defense Department, and then proceeded to sort of engage in what has been a years, if not decades-long debate across parties and presidencies about whether the nation's skies are safe enough and whether those that ensure that they are have the manpower and equipment needed to avoid situations like this one. We've heard, of course, for the last several years, Elizabeth, about close calls on runways from coast to coast, and the concern that air traffic controllers are distracted or not getting enough time off in between shifts to avoid this kind of mistake, and to ensure that pilot training, both civilian and military, is proper so that this kind of thing is avoided. What he didn't talk about, but the Defense Secretary did, is the idea that perhaps there are, not the idea, that the reality is that there are multiple military operations that go on over the skies of Washington at the same time that commercial aircraft is coming and going from Reagan National Airport. If you live here in Washington, it is not uncommon on weekends and late at night, once the sun goes down, to hear low-flying helicopters over your neighborhoods. And often people think, well, what happened? Are they looking for someone? And you look up and you realize, oh, it's another Coast Guard helicopter, or it's a military helicopter, and they're doing those low-altitude training missions that they do, because they like to use the Potomac River, which cuts between Virginia and D.C., and kind of come up the banks of that river to the northwest over Georgetown and Georgetown University, and then up into suburban Maryland, circle around, and then head back down the river at low altitude while planes are landing and coming and going from DCA. So that's part of what may have gone on here. In fact, this morning, the president's nominee for Secretary of the Army conceded to senators during a confirmation hearing that perhaps they're going to have to reconsider holding military exercises at that low altitude over the skies of Washington if it interferes with civilian commercial aircraft coming and going from that large airport. And what Caitlin was saying, it is a small place, it is popular with a lot of people who want to be able to get in and out of Washington easily, but you've also got multiple military bases, the Coast Guard, the local and state police running those low altitude operations, and that may have been part of the problem here. Whether DEI had anything to do with it is absolutely unclear at this point, but the president went there and suggested that the moves he's been making in recent days, controversial, disruptive, as he promised, may be helping solve this mistake that was so tragic and deadly over the skies of Washington last night.
Yeah, and it's important to keep repeating that we still don't know exactly what led up to this mistake. The investigation is ongoing. I want to talk, though, about the victims. We understand that there, that there were some Russian nationals on that flight. Can you go over what the president said and how he plans to handle the victims' families in this?
He confirmed that Russian nationals were on the flight, and we had heard from an ice skating association and the U.S. Figure Skating Association that, in fact, a number of passengers aboard the plane were coming from Wichita from training sessions that were held with younger skaters in the days after a figure skating championship that was held there over last weekend. He said that the U.S. government has been in touch with the Russian government about getting the Russian nationals back to Russia should that be their ultimate resting place. And he also confirmed that there were nationals from other countries, but he wouldn't say which ones, and that information about them would be coming later. Notably, during the briefing, he was asked, have you talked to President Putin about this? And he very sort of brushed it aside and said quickly, no, I hadn't talked to him, not about that. So what's unclear is whether, in fact, there's been a conversation at all since he became president between Trump and Putin, or if he's referring to something that's not yet been confirmed that may have happened during the transition, where the two of them may have spoken. This has been one of the more intriguing aspects of his new presidency, as to what extent is he in touch with the Russian leader. He may have just inadvertently told us there that there has been a conversation that had not been officially read out. So, as often happens when he speaks, he's established a series of new questions that we're going to have to answer, and introduced a concept that was not necessarily on the minds of those monitoring the aftermath of this, by suggesting that personnel policy across the federal government may have been to blame. Elizabeth.
All right, CBS News senior White House and political correspondent Ed O'Keefe. Ed, thank you so much for being with us.